Happy full moon in Libra today. I'm going to share with you how visibility and connection are interwoven with the themes of today's full moon in Libra. So every year around this time, we have a full moon in Libra, but the one in 2025, in April of 2025, is unique. And the reason for that is because during the full moon in Libra, the sun is in Aries and the moon is in Libra, and those are opposing signs. But this year, the sun is right up next to Chiron, which is also in Aries around the same degree in the same place. And so this is going to bring a spotlight to the Aries wound. Chiron is um, a centaur from Greek mythology, and it is a kind of small planetary body that is very influential in the natal chart and also the transiting chart. One of my favorite astrologers, Linda Hill, who specializes in the Sabian symbols, she talks about Chiron and calls it the story that we tell ourselves about some kind of wounding experience or trauma, and or some way we were injured or made vulnerable. And without the story, she says, the wound can heal. So, some of the questions that are important to ask ourselves during a Chiron time is what triggers us? What are your trauma triggers? What gets under your skin? And when we have Chiron in Aries, and it's been moving through Aries since about 2019, and the last time that Chiron went through Aries was between 1969 and 1977. And I'm going to talk about that as we get a little further into this video, what that means for that generation and how that shaped that generation that was born then. So, but first I want to talk about Aries. So Aries, we're in the season of Aries. Aries begins at the spring equinox when the life, the northern hemisphere starts to bloom and blossom. And Aries is the fire sign, the first fire sign of the zodiac. So it represents birth. And how do we come into life? We come into life head first. So in medical astrology, Aries rules the head. It rules the first house of the 12 houses. Aries is number one. Aries likes to be number one. So Aries is about showing up, about being visible, being seen, being a leader, being courageous, being brave. When we bring the sun, which illuminates and shines light on wherever it's moving through, and we have the sun right up next to Chiron, what we begin to see emerging is a story about being hurt for being visible, about having a wound, about being seen. We can also see, because Aries is a sign of the warrior, anger around, how we express our sense of boundaries, our rage. There can be wounding around that. How did we get to express anger? We also see some possible past kind of hurt around fear. Were we allowed to be afraid? How do we handle our fear? And so some of the questions to ask during this time, if this full moon touches on, particular planets or sensitive spots in your natal chart, are, what does visibility or lack of visibility mean to you? Where do you feel safer, being seen or in hiding? And then how does fear show up in your life? What is your response to fear? How do you act when you are fearful? How do you act when you're brave? And have you ever been had an experience where you were shamed or shut down for being visible or not visible, brave or courageous, angry? All of these Aries themes. So, like I said a little bit in the beginning, I want to talk about the generation that was shaped by Chiron and Aries. That is it's my generation, Gen X, and Chiron moved into Aries in 1969, and it moved out of the last degree of Aries around 1977, with a little bit of a visit to Chiron and Taurus during that 1977 period. So, one of the things that we know about Gen X is that they have a association with the term Latch Key Kids. And to me, this really speaks to some of these Chiron and Aries themes. And even if you weren't born then, you may find this useful or relevant. So, a Latch Key Kid was a kid that came home from school and they did not have an adult around. Their adults were working or partying or, expressing themselves, living their best life. But for whatever reason, there was no adult home when this kid got home from school. So they had their own key. The kid had their own key to get into the house and make their snack or entertain themselves and keep themselves safe. Are you kind of hearing these Aries themes here? Self-reliant, independent. Even the key piece, the key, if you look at the symbol of Chiron, it looks like a key. So they're the key to unlock this particular mystery of this wounding experience around these Aries themes. So kids in that Gen X, there's a lot of memes that go around about Gen X kids, how they're kind of feral and, they're very independent and, just kind of wild and really had to grow up quickly because their parents were from that Pluto and Leo generation that was kind of, the shadow side of Leo, which has that kind of self-absorption and, let's have everything be fun. So the response to that was this Gen X that had this kind of cynical, adult when you're kid kind of energy. And so Gen X is shaped by this, by part of Gen X anyway, not the whole segment of Gen Xers, but part of them are shaped by this Chiron and Aries experience. So I'm going to move a little bit here to the Libra Moon because this day is like a focal point for Chiron and Aries. And Chiron and Aries is opposing Libra Moon on this full moon day. And so we've got Sun hanging out with Chiron and Aries over here and Moon and Libra over here. The moon is our emotions, what we need to feel safe and secure. And it's how we process our kind of soft, vulnerable side, how we process our memories and the past, and how we nurture ourselves. So, having the moon in Libra gives us some clues about how we can find some sense of growth. And the opposition, I always call the opposition, it's like a yoga stretch, and it can be a little bit painful, but it also allows us to have more flexibility. So, what's going to give us more growth and flexibility and a sense of stretching is in this full moon kind of zone is the Libra moon. And Libra qualities, balance, beauty, calm, peace, diplomacy, equality, these are going to be really important to remind ourselves of and to be in an emotional kind of cultivation of emotional qualities that represent Libra themes. Libra also, of course, is the sign of relationships and not just relationships with our partner or significant other, romantic relationships, but also relationships with anything, any being, any life form, animals, nature that brings us that sense of reciprocity and connection with another being. So cultivating our connections today with our life affirming connections can help us to heal from some of these past Sun, Chiron, Aries themes that we may have experienced some wounding from. That Libra moon can also help us feel balanced enough and calm enough to get perspective on the stories that we've told ourselves about these past wounds. So before I in this video, I want to talk about two other planetary influences that are really influential on this full moon day. One is that Venus is going to go direct right around the same time as the full moon today. And it's going to go direct in the later degrees of Pisces. Mercury went direct earlier this week, also in Pisces. But very soon, in the beginning of May for Mercury and the end of May for Venus, both Mercury and Venus will be moving back into Aries and joining up with Chiron. So this is going to kind of amplify and put the spotlight again on these Chiron and Aries themes that we're experiencing today and this week. So this Chiron and Aries territory is ongoing for a lot of May. And I really want to flag in particular that if you were born in the years of 1974 to 1976, you are most likely currently in your Chiron return kind of zone. So this full moon and this whole month of May is going to be particularly impactful and meaningful for you. The other thing that can be helpful to help just support you in understanding in a better way how this full moon or where this full moon may be showing up for you in real life is to look at the houses of your astrological chart. And so for this, you can get a free copy of your chart on astro.com, and you can use that to find out where 22 degrees of Aries is and 22 degrees of Libra are. Every house, there are 12 houses, and every house rules a different area of life or is associated with a different area of life. So the seventh house is relationships, the second house is money and resources, the ninth house is long distance travel, the third house is short distance travel. And so you're going to want to look at the houses in your chart where the degrees, 22 degrees of Aries or Libra show up to get more insight. Now, if you would like to learn more about the houses, I am actually going to be teaching a class starting in May with Christina Caudell of Radiant Astrology. And if that is something you're interested in, you can either comment below to sign up for the waiting list, join my newsletter, or email me and let me know. So I look forward to sharing more astrology with you soon. Have a great full moon day.